On this week's power rankings, and again every Saturday night, right? Defense, top four defense, and I just want to do top four because top six becomes even more of a nightmare than top four. And I'm gonna be honest, I've changed these rankings a couple of times. I've gone through and I'm like, all right, and then I go, okay, wait, did I forget so and so? Okay, wait, now I got to go back and I got to change this. Part of it is rookies, right? So which rookies are going to come in and have an impact? We really don't know. With defensemen, it seems to be even more hit and miss than it is anywhere else. Defensemen who might be great 3 or 4 years from now, sure. Does it happen right out of the gate? Not necessarily. So I had to kind of say, all right, if a team doesn't have as many proven defensemen, if we're kind of relying on rookies to come in, I may bump them down a little bit lower on the list. So starting off with 31, we have Ottawa. I want to make this clear. Ottawa's going to get better. Ottawa's going to get a lot better. And I don't know how much better they're going to get this year, especially in the proposed Canadian division, which seems to be a certainty now. That's going to be both tough and a great challenge for them at the same time. So their top four, I've got them all written on a board here. Shabbat, Zaitsev, and I think Brandstrom probably ends up in the top four, and maybe Zub. Now, if Mike Riley ends up being the top four and Eric Goodbranson, I still see them as being 31st. So if both of those rookies end up playing less minutes, then I still see them as being a 31st rated team overall. Number 30, I have Detroit. And again, Detroit is I think through the worst of it. And I don't know that we're necessarily, especially over a shortened season, we may not have a really bad team in this year's National Hockey League. If it's all divisional games, it's going to get pretty competitive, and we may not see a team with historically bad numbers. Now, Detroit, their top four is likely, and again, this is likely, Nemeth in that top four, Hronek, might be Stahl, Stetcher, Seider could get in there, and I like Lindstrom, but again, it's really kind of, it's a blue line that's still being formed, and Moritz Seider could very well end up jumping into a top four role and be solid, but while I like Lindstrom, he didn't play that many games last year, and if both of those guys are going to be in top four roles, potentially, right, that says a lot to me about where Detroit's depth is right now. And so we'll see. Number 29. I have the Kings at 29. The Kings have Mata, Doughty, Anderson, Walker, Roy. So, I mean, there's a number of ways they could go with this blue line. I don't think they brought Mata in just to get rid of him. I think they brought Mata in to test him out and see how he does in a top four role for them. And that may bump Sean Walker down. I like Walker. But there's not really that wow factor in their top four at this stage, other than obviously Doughty. I know there's a lot of talk about whether or not Doughty's washed up and all this. I don't think so. I really don't. And I think Mikey Anderson is potentially going to get a pretty good shot at a prominent role with this blue line right out of the gate. Whether or not he keeps that, I don't know. But again, I think the best is yet to come for that Kings blue line, and I think it's probably at least a year away from starting to come to fruition. They have a lot of cap space. So I wouldn't rule out the Kings maybe adding on the blue line between now and the start of the season. They do have a ton of cap space. Number 28. I have New Jersey at 28. Now you have Butcher, you have Severson, Murray, Subban are likely the top four, with rookie Ty Smith being the wild card, right? Subban has to have a bounce back year. Can't be as bad as he was last year. He really can't. But how much of a bounce back do we see? Does he get back to the kind of numbers he had, 4 or 5 years ago? I don't know that that's possible. And yeah, I like Severson a lot for New Jersey. But in general, I think their blue line, much like some of the others already on the board, the best is yet to come for them as well. Notice that all four of these are teams that missed the play-in round this summer. So yeah, kind of the easy low-lying fruit, right? Like, oh yeah, Shannon's picking low-hanging fruit. But at 27, they didn't. I have Boston at 27th. They lose Krug and they lose Chara. Now, there are those who will say, well, losing Chara doesn't make a difference. It does. It absolutely does. He was a solid option for them. He's not what he was in his prime, no, but still a useful defenseman, and he's still making up his mind what he's going to do. He may end up back in Boston. It's possible Kevin Miller is healthy and he has a top four role, but still, Grzelcyk, McAvoy, Lauzon, and Carlo are the projected top four. I mean, I like Lauzon, but I can't be a homer about this and say, and by which I mean as a Bruins fan, and say, well, he'll be great, the Bruins will be fine. I can't. So I can't have Boston hired in 27th because, again, is Grzelcyk top pairing in the NHL? I don't know. I don't think so. And I understand Grzelcyk's going to try to take some of that offensive role that Krug had. I just don't know that he has that upside. I like McAvoy a lot. It's going to be his blue line from here on, unless they bring somebody else in. They have cap space to do that as well. Number 26, I have Buffalo in 26. So if you're a Buffalo fan, you're ahead of Boston. Have them ahead of Boston. Dahlin is fantastic. Ristolainen puts up the points. And then you have likely McCabe, Yoki Haru, or Montour. And again, you're into what is a okay blue line. I don't think there's any really awful blue lines in the NHL. With the flat cap, and with so many teams that are cap strapped, it has allowed teams like Detroit to quote and add defensemen that otherwise might not have been available. But it does make it it does make it so that you may have blue lines that are better. But in Buffalo's case, I'm not sure that I would have them higher than 26th. Number 25, and ending out this row, Florida. Florida has a way of looking better on paper than what you actually get on the ice. And they did it this year that we finished in September, I think more than any other season I've watched. I can't remember a time where I felt more disappointed for the Florida Panthers. So their top four, Uyghur, Ekblad, Yandel, and Strollman. And I wouldn't be surprised if they find a way to have Strollman's contract sent to Seattle next summer. Something along those lines. There'll be probably one or two contracts that get moved over to Seattle so they can fill out the rest of the roster and reach that 60% of the cap and then maybe make a big splash in free agency. But for Florida, we'll see what happens with that blue line. I like Mackenzie Weegar. I do think that Ekblad, solid defenseman. And then outside of that, we'll see where it ends up. Number 24. I have Chicago at 24. Now, Seabrook says he's healthy, but does Seabrook play? We've seen Seabrook as a healthy scratch when he's been healthy enough to play. Does he end up in a top four role? If he does that speak more as condemnation of their overall blue line, or does it just mean he's back? I don't know. You have Duncan Keith, still the guy there. Dahan, Murphy, Zadorov likely ends up in the top four role. The way they've been talking about him, the way he's been talking about his role with Chicago, it definitely sounds like the expectation as he gets there, which would mean the guys like Boquist and Mitchell are still waiting their turn and may very well be third pairing. Mitchell's the guy for the future. They won't rush him. There won't be any rushing him into a main role. And Boquist may end up stealing the show. But I still have them at 24. If both of those guys develop, they're much higher next year when I do this. Number 23, I have the Jets. It's their Achilles heel. Their goaltending's fantastic. Their forward group's pretty solid. They added some depth in the offseason after that loss against Calgary exposed that they needed more depth up front. But I'm still not sold on the blue line. I love Morrissey. I'm a defender of Neil Pionk. You've been watching this channel since last summer. You'll know that. But then you've got Forbert, DeMello, Pullman, Heinola, who's going to make up the rest of that top four. It just feels kind of wide open. And so, while I like Tucker Pullman as well, we'll see if he can do it over a full season on the Winnipeg blue line and if he ends up with that top four role. But there's some question marks definitely with Winnipeg's top four. If they could add a top four defenseman, right? Number 22. I have Anaheim at 22nd. And it's not that long ago. Anaheim would have been top 5 on this board. I'm going to say maybe 3-4 years ago they would have been top 5. Lindholm, Fowler, Manson, Shattenkirk. Shattenkirk's a good addition. With the addition of Shattenkirk and with them moving on for Gudbranson, it does mean they move up on this board. But again, can I have them higher than 22nd? I'd love to, because I don't have a dislike for the Ducks at this stage of the game, but I just don't see it. At 21, and I know there'll be some fans of that team that look and go, how can we be 21st? But I have the Oilers, because Clefbaum's out. If Clefbaum was playing, this is a team I would have much higher up. The Oilers, you have Nurse, Bear, Russell, Barry is likely your top 4 in any combination of those players. And then, of course, you have Bouchard, who may very well come into the lineup and end up being top 4. It's possible. Evan Bouchard, I think his apprenticeship in the AHL is probably done, but we'll see, right? The Oilers, I think Caleb Jones could end up being solid for them too. But again, I don't have them top 20. And it is one of those question marks that I think holds back the Oilers. They have the wings now to go with the centers. I think they're going to be really good. I think they're going to score a bunch of goals. Can they keep the puck out of the net? And that's where the questions come up. Number 20, Arizona. So Arizona, you've got Ekman Larson, Demers, Chychrun, and Goligoski are likely your top 4. Goligoski probably shouldn't be in that top 4. Not if they're going to be a playoff team. And for Arizona, they don't have cap space. I think Arizona would have revamped their blue line on some level, but they don't have the cap space to do it. And this is a team that's already been losing money. They've got a new owner. They've got new money guys in charge to try to stop losing money. And it's difficult for them right now. The blue line's going to get revamped next offseason. Absolutely, it's going to get revamped. Most of their blue liners are UFAs next year. And unlike UFAs I've been talking about where I'm like, well, these guys are going to get re-signed. In Arizona's case, I don't know that they will. Because I don't know how many of them they're going to want to keep around, especially on the blue line, where I do think improvement is needed. Ekman Larson's fine. Chychrun's fantastic. But then outside of that, I think there's room for some improvement. Number 19, Vancouver. Now, Vancouver, before the Nate Schmidt trade, after losing Chris Tanev, I'd have him right down about here. Nate Schmidt's a really good defenseman. I like Nate Schmidt a lot. I've liked Nate Schmidt since before he went to Vegas. I was sold on him when he was in Washington. And so I think Schmidt is better than some people are giving him credit for. And the idea of Nate Schmidt playing with Quinn Hughes is fascinating. Edler should be helped by playing fewer minutes. That should keep him fresher. And then it's a matter of Tyler Myers. Tyler Myers had his setbacks against Minnesota. I was very vocal about that, but I also gave him credit when he was playing a lot better in series after that. The problem with Vancouver is they allow so many shots. And defensively, they needed to revamp, and I'm not sure they've done enough. I don't know what else you can do. Now, Edler's contract's up next year. I don't think they re-sign him, and I think then you try to change things. The problem is next summer, Quinn Hughes and Elias Pettersson are both due for extensions. It's going to get very expensive in Vancouver. Oh, and Thatcher Demko as well. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. Number 18, Montreal. I may be dramatically underrating Montreal. Yep. So in Montreal, you have Sherratt. You also have that guy, Shea Weber. You have Edmondson and you have Petrie. But you also have Romanov coming up. And if Romanov can force himself into the conversation for the top 4, this could be a really, really strong blue line. Again, if I was rating 1 through 6, Montreal would probably be higher than where they're at. I'm just doing 1 through 4. And I can't pencil in Romanov because I can't see which one of those 4 guys he pushes out. But Sherratt, we'll see. Sherratt had a good year for Montreal. I know there were some plays in the playoffs that fans weren't necessarily happy about, but I still think Sherratt's a decent top 4 option. But could there be better options down the road? Yes. And I do think Montreal's blue line is going to get better, much like I think Suzuki's going to get better. Montreal could end up being a sleeping giant if Carey Price can play into his mid-30s the way that he has over the last 10 years. So don't sleep on them. Number 17, Capitals. So to close out this half, the Capitals, you've got Dillon, Carlson, Orlov, and Schultz. Schultz had a bad year with Pittsburgh. There are those that'll say he had a bad year because he was trying to prop up Jack Johnson. But it's not a great year. The good news is that the Capitals saw him a bunch, and if Brian McClellan thinks he's a good addition, he may very well be right. But for me, I've got the Capitals at 17th on the board. Carlson's a great defenseman. I'm not sold necessarily on the top 4. Number 16, and what's interesting is there are those that'll say you've got Toronto too high on the board, and then there'll be Toronto fans saying, this proves Shannon can't stand us. So, yeah, All right. Morgan Riley and Brody and Muzzin and Lettinen, all four of these defensemen could end up being solid. The problem is Lettinen hasn't played in the NHL yet. We don't know how he's going to adapt to NHL ice. And then you've got, if he's not ready, Hall is probably in the top four. I like Justin Hall. I'm not sold on him being second pairing. I think third pairing would be better for him. Now you've also got Sandin, you've got Liljegren, who could develop into that top four for them this year. There's just, for me, there's too many unknowns with Toronto to have them higher than 16th. I think they're going to be good. I think adding Brody was a fantastic move. Barry didn't fit in, so letting go of Barry made some sense. But yeah, I've got Toronto at 16th. So right in the middle. Number 15, Colorado. And, I wanted to have Colorado higher up. And by the end of this coming season, that may very well happen. So for Colorado, where does Eric Johnson play? So you've got Graves, you've got Makar, you've got Gerard. And Timmins and Byram may very well push themselves into that conversation for top four spot. Does Johnson end up bottom pairing? Does he end up in the top four? There's some unknowns for me with Colorado. I love Gerard's game. Makar is probably one of the best young defensemen in the game. I'm not going to say the best because then everybody's going to what about Dahlin? What about Haskin? And what about, okay, all right, one of the best young defensemen in the game. But I'm sold on Makar. The overall blue line, kind of middle of the pack for me right now. But if Byram comes in and plays as well as he's supposed to, as well as advertised, they'll be top 10 by the end of the year. Number 14, I have Pittsburgh. The Penguins' overall defense is decent. You've got Dumoulin, Letang, and then Matheson came in. Does he play top 4 minutes? Or does Pettersson get that? Pettersson had a rough go against Montreal. There were a couple of plays where it was just, wow, Pettersson. But I like Marino. So if it's Matheson and Marino on that second pairing, I don't think that's the end of the world. I think Marino's a solid defenseman. And as Letang gets older and eventually his minutes get cut back, Marino probably ends up in that top 2 spot. And I do like John Marino's game quite a bit. Have back to last year's preseason, where when they were playing their scrubs, the guys they weren't projecting to make the team, he really stood out as being a fantastic defenseman. Number 13, Sharks. I was torn on the Sharks too. So when you look at the overall names on this, you've got Vlasic, Karlsson, Šimik, and Burns. In name value, that's top 10. But both Karlsson and Burns had down years. The problem is I don't want to over-adjust and put them completely out of it, because the combination of Karlsson and Burns, while I didn't have them as, top defensemen on the top 20 list, the fact they can roll Karlsson and Burns is impressive. So as a top 4, they end up being 13th. They're not top 12 for me, but they're 13th. So we'll see whether or not San Jose has a bounce back year and whether or not Erik Karlsson could be a big part of that. He's supposed to be healthy this year. We'll see. Number 12, Rangers. So the Rangers, who have DeAngelo, Trouba, Lindgren, Fox, and then you've got Keandre Miller and you've got Lundqvist. And what are they going to do? Does Keandre Miller make the team right away? And is DeAngelo going to be a Ranger long term? You get the feeling that whether it's off-ice stuff or whatever it is, that maybe eventually the Rangers say we'll move DeAngelo and see what they can get for him. But the points are fantastic. Jacob Trouba, I thought, had a decent year for the Rangers. He fell back from those career highs with Winnipeg, which I think most of us expected that he would. He should bounce back somewhat next year with the Rangers. So it's a good group. Adam Fox is very good. I think he gets overrated somewhat by Rangers fans at some points, yes, but he is an excellent top 4 defenseman who may very well have top 2 potential, and Lindgren as well. So I have the Rangers in the top 12. Number 11, Islanders. It's a solid defense core with the New York Islanders. So you've got Pelech, Pulock, Leddy, Mayfield, or Dobson. Noah Dobson may push his way into a top 4 spot if Barry Trotz will allow for it. During the return to play during the playoffs, there were times where we kind of expected Dobson to maybe play a little more than he did, maybe get more of a chance. And if they can ever get rid of Johnny Boychuk, then they can keep Barzal. But Boychuk's not a top 4 defenseman anymore, and the Islanders still have, in my eyes, a top 11 defense. Again, if I'd gone 1 through 6 rather than 1 through 4, the rating may have been higher. But to get them past number 10, number 10 is Columbus. I don't know. I don't know if I could have them over Columbus. So at 10, we've got Werenski, Jones, Gavrikov, and Savard. And Andrew Peeke may end up pushing himself into a conversation for top 4 at some point soon too, but I can't see him pushing out Savard. It is a solid group with Columbus. And really, in all honesty, once you get up to, say, 13, 14, you're looking at pretty solid groups that are kind of sort of set. And in Columbus, that is a set group. Peeke gets top 4 minutes, it means somebody got hurt. But Jones and Werenski are fantastic defensemen. So there you go. Number 9, St. Louis. The Blues take a hit without Pietrangelo. They do. Adding Krug, good move. You've got Krug, Parayko, Scandella, and Falk. Dunn's going to get a lot of minutes as well. And then there's Perunovic, who probably gets in as the number 6 guy, maybe the number 7. Maybe he's a healthy scratch, and he gets into a handful of games. If there's as many back-to-backs and as many games over a short period as are rumored, this may end up being a tough year, and for the teams that have that depth, it could be huge. So St. Louis, if Perunovic is good to go, they may have the depth to really make a run with this. Again, if they found a way to keep Pietrangelo, I'd have them higher up. Pietrangelo is a better defenseman than Krug. Krug's great on the power play. Watch him 5-on-5, though. He can be kind of suspect 5-on-5. I love Torrey Krug. It's weird to see him in a St. Louis jersey. Be nice to him. Number 8, Philly. So the Flyers, who have Provorov, Myers, Sandheim, Gustafsson may end up getting that top 4 spot, although Ghost has still got that potential, right? Although you get the feeling Vigneault doesn't really like Ghost. Maybe Braun gets top 4 minutes. Maybe Ghost is a healthy scratch again. I have no idea. But as long as they're able to get the same out of Provorov that they got this year, which Niskanen definitely helped with, then Philadelphia has a really solid defense. Again, top row for them. Yeah. Number 7, Dallas. Dallas for me, so it's Essel and Dell. You've got Klingberg, you've got Alexiak and Heiskanen, and Harley's going to get some games, and at some point he's going to end up being the guy, right? But the fact that Alexiak's top 4, he did play better, but I just think that when you look at Alexiak being the top 4 and you compare it to the other 6 teams, I wasn't going to have Dallas higher up. Heiskanen's fantastic. Klingberg's fantastic. Any given game, one or the other players on the ice. But while Lindell's excellent defensively, Alexiak for me is just a step below the top 4s on the other teams. And at number 6, Calgary. Calgary, you've got Giordano, who did have a down year, but he's still, in shape, and you got to think be good to go. Rasmus Anderson, who's going to take over as the best defenseman. You got Hanifin, and they added Tanev. Oh, and Valimaki is also on that blue line. So with Valimaki, the potential's there that he could end up stealing a top 4 role. Like, if he comes in and steals top 4 role, do you move Hanifin then? Like, there are some good options here if you're Calgary. If things work out, you may be able to actually improve your roster with the strength you have on your blue line. I think they've done a very good job. And I think Calgary fans, you're going to like Tanev. I mean that. I think you're really going to like Tanev. His work ethic is second to none. That's why his face looks like a mess, because he just blocks everything with his face. Might want to keep his hands up. But, he's a fearless warrior out there, and love the guy and wish him the best in Calgary. Other than against teams I cheer for, I wish him the best. Number 5, Minnesota. The Wild have a very solid top 4. You've got Suter, Spurgeon, Brodin, Dumba, Susie's third pairing. But this is a really good top 4. And for Minnesota, Suter's older. He's still a very good defenseman, and Spurgeon's underrated. And again, this is one of those, when you put the 4 of them together, I think you've got a really good unit. This is where, when I did the top 2 centers, and it may have differed from when I talked about the best centers individually in the league. Sometimes the collection of 4 defensemen is better than just the individual defensemen themselves. And I think with Minnesota, I think you have that. Number 4, Carolina. So if you're a Canes fan, you had to know Carolina was going to be high up, right? And yet, there'll be those Carolina fans say we should be number 1. It's close. You have Slavin, Hamilton, Shea, and Pesce. And then, of course, Jake Bean's going to be out there. And if one of them gets hurt, Jake Bean might get a look in the top 4. But it is a very solid blue line. You want to make the argument that the number one blue line in the league. I'll make my arguments, but by all means, Carolina, I think, has a solid blue line. It's part of the reason why, even with average goaltending with Mrazek and Reimer, if you told me, hey, the 2021 Cup champs are going to be Carolina, I would not be as floored as others. I think they have the potential to go on a nice long run, and that blue line is a big part of the reason why. Dougie Hamilton is just getting better every year. It's ridiculous. Number 3, Nashville. Throughout their existence, going back to 1990, 1997 and expansion and all that, Nashville's always had a good blue line. Always. That is the most important part of their team. Josi, Ellis, Ekholm, Fabro. That's fantastic. Josi, Ellis, and Ekholm can all be argued as top 20 defensemen in the National Hockey League. And I argued for Ekholm and for Josi, but Ellis was one of those last few that I cut out of that list. So Nashville's blue line is intimidatingly good. Number 2, Vegas. Vegas has very noisily put together a great blue line. I say noisily because there's no secret about Pietrangelo. It's not like they hid that they were going after him. So you got McNabb, Pietrangelo, Martinez, Theodore, and Nick Hague's out there as a potential top 4 if somebody gets hurt. This blue line's fantastic. Even if you're not a huge fan of Brandon McNabb, it's fine. Braden McNabb, sorry. Brandon McNabb was Pat Sajak's player. But yeah, Braden McNabb is solid, and yeah, this is a really good top 4. Pietrangelo being added to Vegas, it kind of makes everything unfortunate for the West. And it's interesting because, of course, that's why Schmidt ends up in Vancouver. But if they had Schmidt instead of Pietrangelo, I'd probably still have Vegas top 5. I might have them at 5 instead of at 2, but adding Pietrangelo makes them number 2. And number 1, so let's talk about Tampa again. You've got Hedman, you've got McDonough, you've got Sergachev, you've got Chernak. So when I talked about the best defenseman in the league, and there was a lot of, well, where's Sergachev? Why aren't you talking about Sergachev? Sergachev, in order to be a Norris winner, in order for Sergachev to be seen as the best defenseman in the league, he has to be better than Victor Hedman. That is a tall order. That is very, very difficult to see happening. I would honestly say that the Tampa's blue line, even when the day comes that they say, oh, we're going to move on from McDonough, I just get the feeling that this is always going to be a really, really good blue line. They're always going to be top 5 as long as Hedman is there and as long as they're able to keep Sergachev. They have not yet signed Sergachev to an extension. They have not yet signed Cirelli to an extension. They're going to have trouble with both of those things. But for Tampa, assuming they're going to keep Sergachev and that's going to all work out, they still have the best blue line in the league in my eyes. But you can make an argument for any of the top 4. I think you can make an argument for any of them. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. And hey, thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.